I'd say more of the latter than the former. But we would be foolish to say that there isn't a strengthening of the Russia, China, Iranian axis going on here. The Americans are always quick to point out that Russia has no allies. I disagree with that. They have allies, but their allies are more like proxies, like Belarus. Sorry, not proxies, the client states like Belarus or Kazakhstan, or relationships of opportunity, like with Iran or China, without necessarily a strict alliance. There's nothing really like NATO anymore in the former Soviet space. Russia's a pariah now to a large degree at the UN, at the G7, at the G20. It's G7 because Russia was kicked out. And in a lot of other international fora, Russia is a pariah state now. There's all types of sanctions on them, started in 2014, very much deepened in after the invasion in 2022. And so Russia does what it can without really forming close alliances or strategic alliances. It's certainly not alliances of equal status. I mean, obviously, in the American alliances, America's the big cheese, right? But I don't think the British or the French or the Germans would consider themselves not equal partners with Russia, and of course, sorry, with the United States. But Russia and China see themselves as equals, but most of Russia's relationships are that of client states, states like Kazakhstan or Belarus, where Russia more or less controls the country and the head of state and the security situation if citizens rebel. And then China, getting back to a point I made earlier, has been really interesting in 2022 because it's aligning with Russia, it's repeating Russia propaganda, it's making certainly symbolic moves, right? But it's not supporting Russia militarily and in a variety of other ways, in part because China doesn't want to become a pariah state. So being a pariah state, whether Iran or China or Russia, in a world that has human rights and democratic norms, which are seen to be worse violated by those three countries than others. And then, of course, Iran with its own sort of destabilizing role within the Middle East. That's a club really nobody wants to be a full member of. And that's why we end up at these sort of individual or strategic cooperation alliances, aligned interests without really aligned values. Think of a value that China, Iran, and Russia share. There isn't really one. So it's not built on democracy or human rights. It's built on common commercial security and geopolitical interests in a moment that may not even last. And so that's the alliance system we're in now. If I could just add one point, those of us in the academic world, we talk about the Thucydides trap. It's after the famous Greek historian Thucydides, which basically says when you have a rising power and a declining power, they inevitably go to war. And so the way that's being discussed is in the China-US conversation. And I think global order going forward is going to depend a lot less on the world's relationship with Iran or the world's relationship with Russia, but whether or not China and the United States can avoid a conflict over time, a major conflict. Because when those countries' relations break down, and China and US depend on each other economically quite a bit, but are geopolitically opposed increasingly, then we have a really serious issue. And this is, I think, one of the reasons enlightened Chinese leaders are saying, hey, we're going to support Putin to a degree. We're going to work with Iran to agree, but we're not going to go too far down that road because we don't want a global conflict that pits China against the United States and works against long-term Chinese success and Chinese interests.